The big thing that I think is the news on how the Enneagram is actually a spiritual tool is that it tells us when our personalities get too big. And our personalities that we stay in all day long and people reward us for and people expect. Anybody that's I know I have at least one 7 in the room. I've talked to her already. 7's in the room. You know that when you are feeling kind of healthy, people say things to you like, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you fun anymore? We used to always count on you to be fun, to make a joke, to bring the room up." And so our personalities just get reinforced all day long by all the things that people come to expect from us. And they get really big and they take over the show. And when our personalities get so big, they keep us from getting to deeper, truer stuff. And so I believe, and I think you wouldn't be here if you didn't believe, that we have something of a soul. And that's a great mystery. The next workshop that I want to come to is, what is our soul? How do we grow our soul? How do we uncover our soul? But we have a soul. It's a great mystery. It's the mystery of the Christ in you and the Christ in me. And it's in there. But it gets hidden behind episodic meaning, personality, just the daily grind that we get into where we just do the same things over and over again and expect the same things over and over again. But we have a soul and we want to reconnect with it in some mysterious way. And one of the ways that we can reconnect with it is through understanding our Enneagram number, which defines personality, which helps tell us when our personalities are too big and are providing a roadblock to getting to our souls. So, I think we've already begun the journey of how this wisdom can help us get in touch with a better relationship with God in our spiritual lives just through naming and knowing our Enneagram number and allowing ourselves to begin the journey of getting healthier and choosing the healthier side of that number and walking away from the unhealthier side. So I've got kind of 3 little categories of thought I want to give us tonight about how the Enneagram can help us just in our spiritual journeys. And the first is about spiritual practices. I want to talk about that for a minute. The second, I want to talk about the core sin for each number. Are we still allowed to talk about sin? That's a weird word. But we're going to talk about the core sin for each number. It's heavy for a Wednesday night, but we'll make it fun. And then the third thing is I want to talk about what the Christ in you looks like for each number. How each number carries out an individual, beautiful piece of the image and the personality and the character of Christ. So I want to kind of finish with the good news, finish there. So first of all, I want to talk about spiritual practices. There's a million there's a million ways to tap into the spiritual life, right? And there's, Bible reading and Bible study and group work and contemplative prayer and meditation and all the different beautiful, good spiritual practices. And I'm sure through your life, you've tried on some of those. And you found some of those that are really sticky. They're just some that you carry through multiple seasons of life. You found some that didn't fit so well. You've experimented where you had some that were a part of one season of life. And then in the next season of life, you didn't have those. So we've all tried on spiritual practices. But what I want to just talk about briefly is how based on our Enneagram number, there are spiritual practices that are intuitive to us and spiritual practices that are hard for us. And I think we can just use this wisdom to have, first of all, some self-compassion to say, the ones that are hard for us, can we just make some room for that? Can we have some compassion for that? Can we realize that, that's just going to be the case based on our Enneagram type, but can we see that there's an invitation in that to at times press in and try on some new things that aren't as intuitive to us? So I want to talk about 3 groupings of numbers for this portion where we talk about spiritual practices. I want to talk about 1s and 2s and 6s first. Who are my 1s, 2s, and 6s in the room? So 1s, 2s, and 6s are called dependent numbers. And that kind of sounds like a bad word, but all the other words are going to be bad too. So don't feel like we're beating up on you. 1s and 2s and 6s are dependent numbers, which just mean that they are personality types that are moving toward relationship with other people. They're interested in other people. They're moving towards others. They are evaluating the choices and decisions that they're going to make based on feedback from other people around them. And so 1s and 2s and 6s, you like spiritual practices that happen in the context of community. You like coming to Enneagram workshops, usually, unless I've had a long day and am boring, but that happens too, so apologies. But you like coming to community. You like coming to Bible studies. You like meeting in groups. You like doing things one-on-one with other people's spiritual practices. I remember I was in a college ministry, and I talked about this last year. That was one of those, well-meaning, good college ministries that was trying to make true believers out of all of us. And one of our goals, it seemed like, was, you got to start your morning with a quiet time. Does anybody remember that good evangelical word, a quiet time? It meant this very specific thing. It meant this very specific way of sitting with your Bible and reading your Bible and journaling about it. And it was like if you hadn't done that for 30 minutes in the morning, you kind of had started out on the wrong foot. Did anybody else have that experience? So what I, as a 1, 2, 6, I'm a 2, as a member of that little tribe of 1s and 2s and 6s, what I realized is I was always trying to find other people to do it with me. Because I like spiritual practice in the context of community, and it was challenging for me. It's still challenging for me to do anything like have 30 minutes at the start of my day where I'm reading my Bible by myself and journaling, because I'm a verbal processor and I'd like to talk to you about it. And so for 1s and 2s and 6s, you just got to know your just intuitive spiritual practices are going to be ones that are relational, ones that are community-oriented, ones that have feedback in them from other people, ones that allow you to verbally process. And that's good, and that's wonderful, and leads to a lot of good stuff. But the invitation is for you to try on some non-intuitive spiritual practices, the ones that deal with solitude, the ones that deal with silence, the ones that deal with resting, the ones that deal with centering prayer. 1s and 2s and 6s, centering prayer is really hard. And when I say centering prayer, I just mean kind of the meditation prayer where you just kind of decide to pray and you just sort of empty your head and just kind of sit in the presence of God for some period of time, 10 minutes, 20 minutes. Centering prayer, it's really hard for 1s and 2s and 6s. But what the Enneagram tells us is the things that are non-intuitive for us, the things that are challenging, are also places for us to find true gold, are also good for us and healthy for us. So if you're a 1 and a 2 and a 6, you need to know it's beautiful that it's intuitive for you to find life in spiritual practices in the context of community, but you also need to try on solitude and to try on some new things. If you're a 4, 5, or a 9, who are my 4s, 5s, and 9s in the room? If you're a 4, 5, or a 9, you are all about some solitude. And you know how to 4s and 5s and 9s on a prayer retreat, well, 5s don't go on prayer retreats because there's too many people there. But 4s and 9s go on prayer retreats. Just kidding. I love you 5s. But 5s, though, want to know when it's going to end and, what's going to happen and when the breaks are. 9s go on a prayer retreat, and after the prayer, they come back and they're kind of stretching and yawning. They fell asleep. 4s get a lot out of it. But 4s and 5s and 9s, you know about spiritual practices in silence, in solitude, in interior world. You know about going inside to discover God. You're good at that. It's intuitive to you. So spiritual practices like centering prayer or like meditation or like days of silence, labyrinth walking, those sorts of practices for you are intuitive, and that's wonderful. But your invitation, 4s, 5s, and 9s, is to try on spiritual practices that involve other people, to jump into community, to allow other people to come into your spiritual story, to realize that the gospel comes to place you in a context that's bigger than your own context, in a story that's bigger than your own story. So 4s and 5s and 9s, that's your invitation. And then who are my 3s and 7s and 8s? So my 3, 7, 8 friends, you all are doing so much, and you're active, and you like active spirituality, and there's a lot of good stuff in that. You like getting up in the worship service and going to the table. You like, building a habitat house as spiritual practice. You like things that are productive, things that you can do, things that you can put your action and energy behind. And it's intuitive to you, and it's great. And 3s and 7s and 8s fight for justice and march in, marches and do great active spiritual work that is so valuable and wonderful. But what you don't like to do is you don't like to do not doing. You don't like to do spiritual practices that don't involve doing. And in the spiritual life, there's this invitation for balance where all doing should be met by undoing, and all saying should be met by unsaying. Isn't that what we even believe in prayer? That there's a place for kind of active prayer, but then there's a place for prayer that is more just kind of opening yourself to God and emptying your active thought and emptying your sense of speaking or of bringing thoughts to it, right? So 3s and 7s and 8s, your spiritual invitation for spiritual practices is to not do, is to stop doing, and to lean into spiritual practices that don't feel productive, that don't feel like they have a goal and can meet a goal and can move from thing to thing to thing. You actually need to participate in non-productive spiritual practices. So I've got a friend, Nadia Boltz-Weber, who's a kooky pastor out west that some of you all know, and she's an 8 on the Enneagram, and she talks about this thing called Labyrinth Rage. Has anybody ever done a labyrinth? Labyrinths are one of my favorite kind of spiritual practice tools. But the interesting thing is, I, until recently, had never walked a labyrinth with other people. So whenever I had gone to a labyrinth, I had just gone by myself or been by myself. Maybe there was one other person that I didn't know that was kind of going through it. And, if you know anything about labyrinths, it's the definition of non-productive doing, right? I mean, you just find your way to the circle. It takes too long to get to the center, and then you come back out the way you came. And then you go home and nothing's changed about the universe, right? But recently, and I don't know, I like it. But recently I did a labyrinth with 30 other people that I knew. It was a part of a little group that I'm a part of. I teach in Dallas each year, which you can also apply for, a contemplative practices cohort. And I took this group of 30 people through a labyrinth together. Well, I'd never done it with anybody else. In fact, I didn't really think you were supposed to do it with anybody else. We didn't have time to do it 30 people one by one. And I learned what Labyrinth Rage is. You get behind somebody and they're having their own spiritual journey and they just stop for a minute. And they're just having this moment with themselves or their thoughts or God or something. And you're thinking, I'm ready to go. And if you're a 3, 7, 8, you're ready to go. You would absolutely have Labyrinth Rage, which is why the invitation is for you to walk a labyrinth with 30 people or find your way toward that type of practice. So the Enneagram just comes to kind of sneak in this wisdom of, Yes, there are things that are intuitive to you based on your Enneagram number, and that's beautiful. And we shouldn't shame people about it. People who it doesn't work all that well for you to sit in a room by yourself quietly and read the Bible for 30 minutes and do that every single morning at 5 a.m., we ought to just have room to not shame ourselves about that and have some compassion and have some just awareness about that. But then we also ought to recognize what's not intuitive for us and realize that there are times where it's going to be stretching and growing to lean into those spiritual practices. And if we just spend our spiritual lives finding the paths that are intuitive, we're going to miss some really good stuff. Next, I want to talk about the core sins. Each number has a sin associated with it. And what these 9 core sins represent is they represent the thing that we go back to time and time again habitually and pick up. And you'll see this kind of Enneagram philosophy taught also as the 9 passions. Because, when we get out of the Baptist Bible Belt, people don't like the word sin, so we use the word passion. If I go to Massachusetts and teach, I talk about passions. But, we're in Nashville, so I can say sins. With every head bowed and every eye closed, would there be a hand? Just kidding. That's a Baptist joke. I don't know. Do y'all do altar? Do y'all have those kind of good manipulative altar calls where, everybody close your eyes and we've just done a big thing. And now if you've really done something bad last night, raise your hand. Everybody's eyes are closed. Okay. So the core sin for each number, I want to talk real quickly about that because it gives us some pathway to just know what it is that we habitually fall into that negatively blocks our spiritual growth. And for 8s, it's lust. Now I'm going to have an Enneagram definition for each of these sins because they're all going to kind of mean something different in Enneagram language. So when we talk about lust for 8s, it means that over and over again, time and time again, 8s are looking for experiences in life that have a charge that's similar to a sexual charge. They are looking for more. They're looking for intensity. If it's not intense, it doesn't feel intimate. If it's not intense, it doesn't feel important. And so 8s are lusty people in the classic sense of the word, where they are looking for passion and intensity and charge. And the problem is that blocks their spiritual development because it closes themselves off to vulnerability, to softer, tenderer emotions, and it closes them off to finding God in quiet, still, non-passionate, non-intense spaces. So 8s have a spiritual invitation to recognize that core sin of lust is actually blocking you from finding God in just what would feel to you as an 8 like a normal, low-key place or moment or person. 9s have a core sin of sloth. And 9s always feel beat up when I talk about sloth because here's the news. 9s are not lazy. 9s are some of the busiest people on the Enneagram. But what sloth means for 9s is that 9s are lazy about getting to the things that are really the right things for them to get to. So 9s are some of the busiest people on the Enneagram so that they don't have to get to the things that really they should get to. They actually let their busyness keep them from conflict or keep them from some of their own desires and dreams and goals because it feels threatening for them to take all that space in the universe. Feels like maybe they shouldn't take up that much space. They also have, part of the sloth for a 9 is illustrated in 9's desire to be kind of unaffected by life. 9s kind of have a desire to be unaffected by life. And so 9s, the sloth tendency in you is blocking your spiritual ability to pursue new things, to confront conflict and confront problems that need to be confronted to bring lasting peace. And you're gonna get sometimes 9s if you're not careful to the end of life and have a big regrets analysis because you spent so much time being busy in so many things that you didn't get to the things that were yours to get to. 1s, their core sin is anger. But anger is not the best word. Resentment is a best word. Because, resentment is a type of anger, but it's almost like resentment is anger that lives in the heart. And so here's what resentment looks like for 1s. I'm just going to kind of role play this. It looks like I've spent my whole life doing things the way that they were supposed to be done, following all the rules that we agreed we were all going to follow, while the rest of you were out having fun. You apparently didn't think the rules applied to you, and so I've been having to do my part and your part, and didn't you think that I just wanted to have fun too? But somebody had to clean the kitchen and raise the kids and follow the rules and do the stuff. And so, do you see, all of that resentment sits inside the hearts of 1s, and 1s have built up anger mostly at themselves for the things that they have not done right in their mind, the ways that they've not measured up. They have a lot of anger about the ways in which they know that they've been tough on other people that they love. They have resentment about what other people around them have not done. They have resentment about the fact that nobody came and saved and rescued them, and they were saving and rescuing and fixing and doing all the stuff for everybody else, and nobody must have noticed they needed help. And that anger, 1s, if you don't find a way to befriend the anger first, recognize that it's there, stop shaming yourself about the anger, it will grow and grow and grow, and then will spew and spew and spew. And anger that spews from a 1 is the worst kind of anger, because it's the most damaging and deadly kind of anger to relationships. And so 1s just have to know that that's there, and you have to befriend it, or it's going to block you from so much good relationship growth and so much good spiritual growth. And 1s, you don't want to own it because it's not right to be angry, and you're trying to be right. And so here's the thing. We all think, you as 1s don't think that we think you measure up, but we think you've already surpassed us. You are so good. You're doing things so well. It's okay for you to join the human race and name that you're angry, because we're angry too. But 1s, you don't like to name it, and that's what makes it bigger, and that's what makes it worse, and that's what makes it more costly. 2s have a core sin of pride. And I'm a 2, so I don't like to admit this, but pride is a big problem for 2s. And the thing is, 2s aren't, proud of their possessions and lands and houses and whatever. 2s are prideful in this way. Every 2 feels like they're fine. I'm okay. I don't need anything. I'm good. And so the good news about that for you is you're not fine, clearly. I can just tell. And so because I'm fine, I can bring all of my energy to helping you. And if you need to be saved, if you need to be rescued, if you need to be fixed, I've got everything inside me that is needed to save and rescue and fix you. And 2s do that their whole life. And the problem is, 2s, the spiritual roadblock of pride is cutting you off from naming your own demons and your own needs and your own desires. You've lost touch with yourself. And if you're not careful, what you're doing is you're creating manipulative, controlling relationships, because now everybody owes you. Now everybody has given you this indispensable role in their lives. Now you're enmeshed in everybody's story. Now you've got a codependent relationship with the person that you're trying to help and fix. Now you're enabling bad behavior. And pride is what's funneling you toward all of that. And it's blocking spiritual progress. 3s have a core sin of deceit. And the thing that 3s are doing, 3s are not actively deceiving anybody. They're not trying to pull one over on anybody. They're deceiving themselves because 3s actually believe that they are adaptable enough to become whatever they need to become. They believe that they can change and adapt and shift and change their identity to be successful wherever they are. And what's happening is they have totally lost touch with their core sense of identity and true self. And so 3s, when asked, who are you really? What do you want really? What do you really feel like your calling is? That's a mysterious question to a 3 because they've lost touch with that. And so the sin of deceit, which again is not an evil deceiving others, it's a self-deceit. The sin of that is blocking you from really naming and pursuing your true, authentic self. And a 3 who has discovered and chosen to pursue their true, authentic self is the most beautiful force in the world. And so 3s, you need to start asking yourself, what is consistently true about myself throughout my whole life story and throughout every relationship that I've ever been in? What are the things that are always true about me, about what I like, about what I pursue, about who I am, that have always been true for my whole life story in every relationship? And those are your building blocks to discovering true identity and true sense of self and walking away from deceit. 4's core sin is envy. And 4s are not envious of your car or your kids or your house. They're envious of the way in which it seems like you get to be normal and they have to be weird. Seriously. 4s feel like they've got a harder time in life than the rest of us. They feel like the world is harder on them than it is on everybody else. And so they're envious of the way in which it seems like the rest of us get to be normal and have normal jobs and take normal trips and do normal things. And they just can't bring themselves to be normal. But the tricky thing is the worst thing in the world to a 4 would be to be normal. So they don't really want to be normal, but they're jealous that the rest of us get to be normal. And it's this big spiral. And the news is where envy comes from 4s is 4s feel like nobody ever understood them and nobody understands them and nobody takes the time to really know them. And it's always a spiritual invitation to 4s to say, absolutely, you're right. Nobody really understands anybody else. But can we stop having that as the goal and maybe make room for the new goal of, but what if it would be enough just for people to set a place at the table for me, even if they can't understand me? What if 4s you could set a place in your table for the fact that other people in your life also feel misunderstood and feel unseen and feel unheard and feel like they are missing some critical ingredients or not able to fulfill all their dreams and goals too? 4's sin of envy blocks you from entering into community with other people because you've set yourself apart as the person who is offbeat or as the oddball. But actually, you sometimes are the one who's taking yourself out of community. And what if you worked through the sin of envy to place yourself back into the human story? 5s have a core sin of greed. And this sin of greed for 5s shows up everywhere. It shows up in the way they manage affection, because They're not sure if they have enough to give too much, so they hold back what they have. It shows up in energy. Fives can be kind of greedy with their energy because they're not sure they've got enough. It shows up in the way they spend their time. They can't give you too much time because they don't feel like they have quite enough time, so they can only give you this much time. It shows up in the way sometimes that they accumulate information to feel like there can never be enough, so I need more and more and more and more and consume more and more. But greed is getting in your way, fives, from living into a spiritual world that talks about abundance and says the universe is not scarce. The universe is abundant, and there's actually more where that came from. And the spiritual sin of greed is blocking fives from living into an abundance mindset. Sixes have a core sin of fear. And really a better word for the fear that sixes experience is anxiety, because anxiety is the mood music that runs through the life of a six, right? Sixes see dangerous situations and the potential for danger everywhere. And so life feels threatening. And you're right, the world is dangerous if you're a six, and that's good. All of these core sins that I'm talking about, they've all got kind of an other side of the coin that's good and helpful, right? But the thing that fear blocks you from, sixes, is it blocks you from trusting yourself. It blocks you from trusting your own inner guidance. It blocks you from taking risk. It blocks you from a lot. Fear is stopping you from reaching your whole potential. So if your spiritual life is going to grow, it's got to be built on a foundation, sixes, of recognizing, naming, befriending, owning fear, and choosing to move around fear to faith. And not courage. Courage is kind of overrated for sixes. Courage kind of feels like you're mustering something up, like you gotta white knuckle your way to courage. But sixes are invited in the spiritual life to lean into faith, which is actually about letting go and opening up and trusting that you're somehow in the hands of something benevolent in a beautiful mystery, and that you can have faith in that. And then sevens, my final number. Your core sin is gluttony. And gluttony shows up in every way that gluttony can show up. It shows up in more. Sevens want more. Sevens aren't satisfied with what they've had. They want something new, and they want more. And gluttony can express itself in any way. It can be just too much of whatever, whether it's food, whether it's consumption of any way, just more and more and more. And sevens, your spiritual invitation of moving to the other side of gluttony is actually to choosing sober joy. Sober joy are your two words, sevens. Finding the pathway to joy that is found in a way that's not more and greater and bigger and higher and more exciting, but joy that's found in sobriety, that's found in the mundane, that's found in quiet, that's found in less, not more. Because gluttony is keeping you from finding joy in the everyday. It's keeping you from enjoying the people who are right in front of you and the experiences who are right in front of you, because if you pursue gluttony, you're always looking for the next thing, for more, for something greater. So those are the core sins. And if you know the core sin tied to your Enneagram number, you know what is blocking you from spiritual growth. And so there's just an invitation to just name it. And again, we're doing non-judgmental self-awareness. So there's no shame here. We all carry this. We all carry these things. It's intuitive for us, based on our personality, to carry these core passions and sins. But we can choose a different path. Okay, my last little piece. I want to go back through the numbers quickly, and I want to tell you what I see. I want to end with the good news. Y'all with me? Well, we've gone from the bad news. It's like, do you want the bad news or the good news first? So we've done the bad news. We talked about sin. And now I want to end with the good news and talk about the way in which I see each Enneagram type as carrying out the character and person of Christ. And I think these are just things for us to celebrate in ourselves and to celebrate in our personality as ways in which we can recognize the character of Christ showing up in ourselves. And there are ways in which we can recognize the character of Christ showing up in the people that we love that are different Enneagram types from us. So we'll start back with 8s again. I start with 8s a lot because I lose 8s if I don't start with them. They want to know, when are we getting to them? Picking on you, Clay. So 8s, the Christ in you is justice. The beautiful thing about 8s, people misunderstand 8s all the time and think just because 8s are tough, just because 8s are strong, just because they're passionate and a little bit aggressive and intimidating, that 8s are actually somehow bullies or control freaks. They're not. They're the opposite. 8s call off the bullies. 8s are pursuers and fighters for justice. And the beautiful gift for 8s is you are the only number on the Enneagram that has both a heart for the underdog. 8s love the underdog. They want to defend the underdog. They want to protect the underdog. You're the only number that has a heart for the underdog and the energy to confront the bully. You've got both of those things. You've got the passion and the energy and the drive to confront the bully, and you've got the heart for the underdog. So 8s carry out the character and persona of Christ that's a pursuer of justice and wanting things to be right and wanting people to be included and not wanting people to be put down. It's a beautiful thing. 9s are peace brokers. Two things I want to say about 9s. Number one, you're a peace broker. And ultimately, that's a beautiful, beautiful spiritual value, right? You are motivated to make peace between people. And you're motivated to make peace between ideas and philosophies because you're a both-and thinker. And that's another spiritual Christ in you gift that 9s have. You're a both-and person, not an either-or person. And isn't it true that the gospel is almost always both-and, not either-or? And that's a beautiful thing that you have 9s to bring to the world, is brokering peace between people and brokering peace between competing ideas and competing systems and philosophies and theologies. If you've got a theology split happening in your church, you want a 9 to kind of guide the community through that. Because 9s are the number that can best hold things in tension and honor both ideas and both communities. 1s, there's 2 things I want to say to you about the Christ in you image that you bear. Number 1 is righteousness. 1s, you are good. You are righteous in the best way. Righteous is turned into kind of a bad word, right? Because we think about somebody who's self-righteous. Forget about that for a minute and just recognize 1s, you have a desire and a drive to do things rightly. And the gospel, every single piece of scripture that talks about the summary of the gospel and says, what are we supposed to do? It always has, 50% is about justice for others and 50% is about righteousness. And once you get it, there's just a drive toward righteousness. And the other thing that you bear out of the image of Christ is integrity. 1s are the integrity number. They don't want to live divided. They don't want to live in conflict between what they know to be true and how they actually live. They want their life to be integrated. And that's a beautiful thing that you carry out. 2s, you're empathy people. You carry out the empathy of Christ. You actually want everybody to belong. The beautiful thing about 2s is every single 2 wants a place to be set at the table for everybody. You don't want anybody to be excluded from the table. In fact, if somebody's excluded from the table, you don't want to be at the table. You, as twos want to be a part of centered set communities, not boundary set communities. You know, healthy communities are centered set. They're communities like this one that are all kind of gathering around a centerpiece, and that centerpiece is some articulation of the Jesus story. But within the community, there's people that are all over the place about what they think and who they are and how they live and how they believe and what their background is. But there's a thing in the center that holds. But there's communities that are not healthy like that and that are actually boundary set communities. And it's like, we don't care as much about what's in the center. We're more interested in kind of whether you fit in this little, and if you're right out here outside the boundary, we're sorry, let us help you find a new community. And twos carry out the character of Christ, and twos create and pursue and live in centered set communities where everybody can belong, everybody gets a seat at the table, and there's true emotional intelligence and empathy. Threes, you carry out the character of Christ by being a change maker. Threes don't want to just think about it, talk about it, feel about it. Threes want to do about it and to bring change. And that's a beautiful thing that you have to give to the world, that you have to give to the kingdom, is you are a change maker. You have the energy and the ability and the desire and the drive to actually pursue good change. Threes also bring together different people and different ideas, kind of like nines. They've got that as well. Fours. Two things to say about fours. Number one, fours are compassionate friends in the way that Jesus was a compassionate friend. Fours, we say, are the only number that can sit inside of pain with you and not need to fix it. Fours can sit in your pain. They can sit with you. They can have so much compassion. Also, fours are the artists of the Enneagram. Now, it doesn't mean that fours are always, artists by profession. They don't wear it on their sleeve all the time. Doesn't mean every four is a poet or an artist or something like that. But fours are the artists in that they are our tour guides to beauty and our tour guides to creativity. And we all know that the three eternal attributes of God are truth and beauty and goodness, right? And fours are our architects for beauty. It's a beautiful thing that you have to give to the world. Fives are the persuaders of truth. Here's the beautiful thing that fives have to give to us. The beautiful thing that they carry out of the image and likeness of Christ is that fives have discovered truth. Fives have pursued truth. Fives have done all the work that they need to do to discover and discern and get information for what's right, what's good, what they want to do, and then they are able to clearly and articulately it's funny that I can't articulately say that word. That's good. Fives can then persuade us in healthy ways toward the truth that they've discovered. Because here's the thing, fives have done their homework more than the rest of us have. So when fives get to something that is right and good and true, they are able to defend it. They are able to walk us on a journey toward it with them. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a gift. Sixes, you are community builders. You are community builders. Remember what I said last week, that sixes are the only number on the Enneagram that is more inclined toward the achievement of the community and the group than their own personal achievement. Every other number on the Enneagram is a little bit more wired to kind of pursue and care for their own personal achievement, but sixes aren't. And so a beautiful gift that again carries out the persona and the likeness and the character of Christ that sixes carry is the building of community and the bringing together of a people. Saying it's not just me, myself, and I, it's us, it's we, it's a group. If it's not good for all of us, it's not good for some of us. And sixes are loyal. Loyal, loyal, loyal to the core. 1s and 6s are the most loyal numbers on the Enneagram. 6s are loyal and faithful and true. And that's a beautiful gift, a beautiful way that you carry out the Christ in you. And finally, 7s. 7s are cheerleaders and enthusiasts in the best way. 7s remind us, I was preaching a wedding recently, and one of my favorite things to share at a wedding is, the beautiful fact that Jesus' whole public ministry, started at this wedding in Cana, right? And I love that because it's just this little hidden in plain sight subversive way for Christ to tell us the spiritual life isn't all about being serious, right? The spiritual life is about celebrations and parties and joy and weddings and life and love. And 7s, you get that. You just intuitively get that the spiritual life is not about being sober and serious and pensive all the time and reflective and kind of casting your spirit down. No, 7s, you couldn't even do that if they paid you to. You're an enthusiast, and you remind us about the vibrancy and the joy of the spiritual life. And 7s are cheerleaders for other people. 7s want good things to happen to other people. 7s want to see people succeed, and they love to cheerlead and celebrate as other people rise. And that's a beautiful, beautiful gift that 7s bring. So, we're almost out of time, but I want to allow questions in a moment, but let me kind of wrap up in this way. I realize that in a group like this, we've got all types of thoughts and feelings and backgrounds and histories with the Enneagram. And that's what's fun about coming into groups like this. There's some of you I know that you've been eating, drinking, sleeping Enneagram stuff for years. And there's some of you that, your wife drug you here. Hopefully not too many of you, but we're all in this different place. So let me just kind of give my little final, just kind of, where do we go from here? What do we do with this? How do we use this wisdom? My first comment about that is, if you're new to the Enneagram, don't know your number, are still kind of kicking the tires on it, that's awesome. I want to say, I just believe we need tools. We need some tools to help us. We need tools to help us recognize what we get wrong, what we get right, how we can be healthy, how we can do things in a different way, how we can get healed, all these things. The Enneagram is a tool, not the only tool. If you liked it these 1 week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks that you were with us, it's a great one. You can spend a lifetime working with it. If you don't like it, move on from it. There's a lot of other tools in the toolbox. There's other good ones. But I just think we do all need some tools to help us. And so I just hope that you've kind of enjoyed a dive of some sort into this one. The second thing is, if you're kind of bought in some way, and you know what your number is, or you'd like to discover what it is, and you want to keep going with this, in these 3 weeks, I've tried to kind of introduce this. This was not what we did last year, where this was not a know your number 3 weeks. So this wasn't designed, of course, to kind of be a come these 3 weeks and you'll get all the information about all the 9 numbers and you can walk out of here with your number. This was kind of designed as a 2.0 thing of assuming that you know your number, what do we do from there? So we've introduced all this stuff in these 3 weeks. We've talked about the core sins. We've talked about spiritual practices. We talked, about thinking, feeling, doing, head, heart, gut, orientation to time, past, present, future. We even talked about subtypes last week, the sexual, instinct and the social and the self-preserving. That's a soup of stuff, right? It's kind of like, it's a lot of different pieces. And the real work of the Enneagram begins with just spending time with your core Enneagram number, your number, and discovering what it is to be healthy in that number and what it is to be unhealthy. And if that's all you ever get to, that's a great use of this tool and this Enneagram wisdom. But don't move on too quickly to all the other stuff. We've set the table for it to kind of put some of this language in your heads and in your notes. We've talked about it all, but don't move too quickly from piece to piece, because then it just becomes a lot of information that doesn't get translated into life transformation. And so I would just say, kind of let whatever in these 3 weeks we talked about that resonated with you, let it kind of sit and settle. Let the rest go by the wayside for a minute. Go back to your core number. And then, after a season with that, and really realizing what does that look like to be healthy and unhealthy, come back to some of the stuff we've talked about. I'm so honored by just you all being here. I love this church. I love Clay, and it's really a blessing for me to be here. You know, I'm local. I'm in Nashville, just right here, live just down the street, and I have events. You know, I'd love for you to kind of follow me on all the stuff and come to something else, or send me an email and we'll talk, or we'll have coffee. But I hope this has been a helpful tool, and I'm just grateful for your friendship and partnership and journey in this. And so I'll kind of end it there, and then we'll kind of move into a time where I'd love to get any of your kind of questions or thoughts about anything Enneagram related.